And action. Hello, everyone. I'm Billy. Welcome to Show and Tell. Today's episode, I have a guest from the UK, and I will try not to keep you too long before I introduce her because it's a fairly lengthy episode. But just to get the housekeeping out of the way, you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as billietoy, and I'll put it on the screen. I know if you're enjoying my programs that you're going to hit that subscribe button, and it's in one of these corners, a little red square that says subscribe in it, and then it'll offer you 3 bells. Don't forget to choose the top bell because that's the one that's going to notify you. I pop up at all different times, and the best way to know is to get that notification because I don't have a regular standing gig that's Thursdays at 2 o'clock Eastern. No. I'm a sort of creative and I shoot from the hip, and it's different days of the week and different times. And just to reiterate, that's the best way. Okay, I don't want to belabor this. Let's get on with my guest because she's going to show you a lot of beautiful vintage knits. Stay tuned. Okay, I'm going to say good morning because it's morning where I am, but it's mid-afternoon where my guest is. I'm going to let Sophie introduce herself, and she's going to tell us where she resides today, and she'll tell us a little something about her town, and then we'll talk about knitting. Okay, Sophie, take it away.
Hi, Billy. Hi, everyone. I'm Sophie. I live in Kent, in southeast England, in a small village called Hartley, although I am originally from Germany, and I've been in the UK for now, I think, oh gosh, I have to think about that for a second. 16 years almost. Yeah, but my little village doesn't really have much in it, and I've only recently moved here. So before, I actually lived in London. So London obviously is a big tourist city. So there I would recommend maybe going to the Wallace Collection, which is a small museum that isn't as famous as the big ones like the V&A or the British Museum. But it is absolutely wonderful because it has an amazing 18th century collection of porcelain, furniture, paintings, pottery, armor. It's really famous for arms and armor as well. So it's a little gem that I would highly recommend visiting.
Well, thanks for that. I still think people might want to know about your little town because, you know, if you go to the Edinburgh Yarn Festival or Shetland Wool Week, I think it's called, people might make side trips and they might end up in some of these little places, or they might have a relative in a town that's only a few kilometers from you. So I think those off the beaten path things are sometimes much more interesting than the major attractions. And I mean, the museum that you've suggested in London is one that I don't know. So I'm thankful for that.
Ah, good.
Anything in your little town that would be really a treasure unknown?
The thing is, it's really, really tiny. It really is just a tiny village.
Yes, I've had other guests tell me that when you blink, you've driven through it.
Yeah, okay. We have a corner shop. So there is quite an old church, which is lovely to look at with a thatch roof. So I guess I could recommend that. I think
What's the name of it?
I think it's from the 15th century. I don't actually know the name.
Okay, I'll let you off the hook with that. Thanks.
I'm still new to this area, so no, I don't really know that much, especially since it's mainly been during lockdown.
That's tough. So, well, before we talk about the adorable hat that you're wearing and the garments that you're going to show us, and I love your color scheme, you've carried it through everything. I just wanted to mention that to me, the quintessential vintage name is Sophie. I had a great aunt Sophie. It's not a name that you really hear much anymore, a little bit here and there, but I had a great aunt Sophie. My grandmother was one of 12 children, and her youngest sister was Sophie. And I knew Aunt Sophie growing up. Aunt Sophie was still around, I think, in the early 1990s, although she'd been born probably 1906, something like that. And once upon a time, I had a little pin in marcasite that said Sophie, but somebody gobbled it up on eBay. Also, Bette Midler, I believe, named her daughter Sophie. And sometimes she'll say, Soph, I wanted to tell you, I mean, she talks to her sometimes in some of her music. So anyway, the hat, I love the hat. You can tell I'm a hat lover. You knit that, I presume.
Yeah, it's crochet actually.
Oh, it's crochet, okay.
Yeah, it's crochet. I made it to match the knit top that I made. I just had some leftover yarn and I thought, what can I make? I
might have to break from my practice of only knitting to crochet that hat. I love it very much.
It's really,
I have crocheted. In my life, I have crocheted one thing, a big Afghan.
Wow.
And I learned to crochet specifically to make that because it had ruffles and flowers. It was very pretty. But I would pick up my crochet hook again to crochet that little cap. It's very, very cute. And there's a brooch on the side of it.
Oh, on here. That is, yeah, it's a hat pin.
A hat pin. Ah, there you go. Oh, it's a great hat, Sophie. I really, really like it a lot. And yeah. tell us about the yarn. The color's very pretty. And then of course the sweater that matches.
It is a silk yarn, a hand-dyed one from a UK hand dyer. Which the name I can't think of right now. I'd have to look it up. Okay. I always forget.
I'll put it in the show notes. It's okay.
Okay, good, perfect. Yeah, really, she does some really nice colors. She does a lot of kind of graduated yarns as well, but she does a few just normal full color ones. And they are often very vintage colors. So I really like them.
This is the color of all the satin robes and lingerie. Yeah. It's that real peachy pink. I have one of those robes. I actually wore it in an episode at the turn of the year.
Oh, I think I remember that.
Reclining in bed.
Beautiful.
Yes, that color is the classic lingerie color.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and the yarn, because it's a silk blend, it's really nice to wear, and it's also good for spring and autumn when it's maybe a little bit more mild and you don't want full wool anymore.
Is it sleeveless or short sleeves or?
Yeah, it is. It's little short sleeves.
Oh, the sleeves are very pretty. They're hidden under there.
Yeah, they're hidden.
It's stunning. It's just really. It's sensational.
Yeah, I don't have the pattern to show you on this one actually, because it was just it was a PDF pattern that I got from somewhere.
That's okay. It's very pretty.
I do have a few patterns to show.
Are you on Ravelry?
I am.
Tell us your Ravelry handle.
It is VintagePhie, as in PHIE, like Sophie.
Okay. And is this sweater picture there so people can go have a look? Okay, that's good. That's good. The stitch also reminds me of those old, the old girdles like my grandmother had that wore that sort of flesh nude color that had perforations in them, I guess, so that you could breathe. This reminds me of that because you have those little points.
Yeah, these little drop stitches. Yeah.
It's just
like it's a little drop stitch pattern that then makes the stitch wider once you drop it.
And what's the lower portion like? Does it stop at your waist? Is there ribbing? Okay. 2x2 ribbing?
2x2 ribbing.
It's just adorable and it so suits you.
Thank you.
Love it.
Yeah, it's really nice to wear. It's one of my favorites, I think.
Great. Okay, what's on the mannequin?
Oh, on the mannequin is one I knit last year during the pandemic, because I did an awfully lot of knitting during that time. And
you're saying pandemic past tense, like it's over.
Yeah, well, it's because I have tennis elbow now. I am not getting much done now, so that's why past tense.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, oh, it's okay. I'm having a little break.
You're looking into the Portuguese?
Yes. Yes, when you mentioned that actually via message, I looked at it and I've been teaching myself this week.
I've never tried it, but I hope that it works for you because, oh my goodness, if you're addicted as I am, I just can't even fathom what I would do if something happened and I could no longer knit.
Yeah, I had a break for 1 week. I didn't pick up the needles for 1 week.
And that helped, I bet.
And it did help. But yeah, then I just couldn't manage anymore. And I've been doing a few rows each day. I've been keeping it to very minimal amount of knitting. And actually because I've been starting to do the Portuguese knitting, it's much slower than when I normally knit. So that slows me down automatically, which is good. And it hasn't been aggravating my elbow very much, which is good as well.
Good, good. How can I say this delicately? When you're wearing a garment like this that has a lot of peekaboo stuff at the neckline or the shoulders, I have had some garments that were kind of like couture made, where they take a little bit of maybe like embroidery floss and they just have a little chain of stitches that's 2 inches long with a snap. And it's attached to the inside of the shoulder, and then you can hook it around your bra strap and then snap it back on, and it keeps everything in place. I have a couple of garments that are made like that. It's really, I mean, since we're talking about the neckline of this one, which has all these adorable peekaboos, it's a good device to have.
Yes, yes. A lot of my vintage clothes have those as well. It's very useful.
Along with shoulder pads and other things. I'm knitting something now where I knit it specifically with shoulder pads in mind. So I put a little extra, a few extra stitches in the shoulder because I know I want a shoulder pad look in there. Anyway, I digress. So I think you were about to tell us about the sweater that's on the mannequin.
Oh yes, it's from a 1930s Needlewoman magazine, so a British magazine. And I think it's called a coat, even though it's obviously a cardigan, but they often called slightly longer cardigans that were meant to be worn closed coats, and slightly thicker cardigans, because the yarn, the way it's knit,
two colors,
makes a very thick fabric.
I'm sure that's why they called it coat, because it's not. Yeah. It's not a sweater weight. It is an outer weight when it's thick like that.
Yeah, and it is very warm.
I'll bet.
Yeah, it's. I knitted in a alpaca wool blend, so it is very, very nice and toasty.
And it looks to me like it's a dusty rose and blue. Is it blue?
Just gonna get closer. Okay. Yes.
Wow, it's very Chanel-like, very structured and formal. The belt is attached, or does it come off?
It does come off, but there are belt loops that I made.
And can you show us again the neckline? Do you tie that?
Yeah, let me just move slightly. There, you can, I think the original pattern actually did have it tied like this.
Just push the mannequin back a smidgen, please.
There we go.
Okay. Oh, that's nice, because then you could put a little hat pin or stick pin there too.
Yeah, I think the model is shown actually with a little pin here in the middle. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's although lovely. I do quite like it just untied as well. What I've done before is I've put 2 pins on it like that.
Okay.
Slightly different way of wearing it.
And is this from the 1930s?
Yes.
Is everything you knit from the 30s specifically?
At the moment, yes. It's not always been. I have made some things also from the 40s. I am planning a project from the 20s because I have some of the original yarn that is called for the pattern.
Wow.
In the pattern. So I want to knit up the original. And I also sometimes knit modern patterns that appeal to me and that have a slight vintage feel.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I approve. What is it about the 30s in particular? I mean, a lot of people like myself who love Art Deco embrace the whole period, 20s through the 40s. But it seems to me that the 30s has some particular allure to you, and I wonder why that is.
Yeah. 30s fashion always has a lot of details normally here and around the neckline or to the sleeves, like big cuffs or kind of Lego mutton sleeves, for instance, or they have a tie at the front or a big ruffle, big bow. I don't know. It's something about the details that I love. And I also love these little perchy hats that just kind of sit on your head and look very chic. It has a certain elegance that you don't find as much later anymore. That obviously 40s and 50s fashion can be very elegant as well, but it's in a slightly different way. I'm not sure how. I'm not sure why the 30s in particular appeal to me.
Maybe in a previous life you were alive then and you're drawn to that.
Maybe, who knows? I only got into very 30s fashion in more recent years. Before that, I was much more of a 1940s girl. I wore a lot more 1940s clothing. But I've gradually gone earlier into the 30s. And it just, I don't know, I feel more comfortable in it than I did in 40s clothes. Even though I quite enjoyed the big shoulders and nice shoulder pads, that kind of shape. I feel a lot more comfortable in 1930s clothing.
I like the sleekness of the 40s. Things started to become very streamlined. And in fact, my taste in decor, you can sort of see it's very minimalist. So I think for me, I really like the 40s more. But I just love what you're wearing so much that I would branch out. For me, anything in that period, it's all good. It's all good. And lately I've been doing a couple of things from the 50s as well. Yeah. It's so romantic. I mean, it's just, I feel like hopelessly romantic. Okay, there's another little hat behind you, I guess you want to tell us about?
Yes. This is something I haven't actually had on my Instagram or anything. It's a little hat scarf set I made, a 1930s one. A little matching set, and I've got the pattern here as well.
Okay.
And it's from a Monarch Styles, Monarch Yarns pattern book.
I'm not familiar with any of these British publications. I've heard of Stitchcraft and
this is Canadian, actually.
Oh, okay.
I think. It's not British because I got it on eBay from abroad.
Okay.
But it is this pattern, which is really nice. I couldn't, well, no, I could see that it was a lace pattern, but I couldn't quite tell from that little picture what it was going to look like in real life. But then I made the scarf and I really liked it, and I thought, let's make the hat too. And it was just from lots of leftover yarns I had. And it's a nice little lace pattern.
And that's knit or it's crochet?
It's knit.
It's knit, okay.
Yeah, yeah. There's I think 1 or 2 rows of crochet just around the edge that you were supposed to add. But yeah, it's fully knit, and then the hat has the same pattern as the scarf. And I got to wear it once this last week when I had to go to the office. But other than that.
Do you have something special that you wear that with? Something with those colors?
I wore a brown coat.
Brown, okay.
Yeah.
That
because it has brown in it, so I think it would go well together. Okay,
carry on. I think you have more things to show us, don't you?
Yes, I have loads actually. I didn't know how much you wanted to see.
Oh, I mean, we have time, so keep going.
So what I have to show you is, this is another one of my knits from last year, and it's actually the second time I made this pattern, and it's a lace knit top from a suit. I always struggle to make a matching skirt with things because skirts take so long to make, so I always end up just with the blouse. But it's a really, really beautiful stitch.
I love the color also. It looks like it's a coral color. Is that it, or is it red?
It's a corally red, I would say, probably.
Very pretty.
Yeah, and you basically just knit it straight in a big kind of square, and then you loop these little threads through, these little crochet chains at the shoulder, and then when you put it on, it has a little peekaboo effect on your shoulder, which is really, really nice, very clever.
And what decade is this? Is this the 20s?
This is 30s as well. This is the pattern. And that's an American pattern. Yeah, it's from a Minerva knitting booklet. It's an American one. I like Minerva ones a lot. I think they're beautiful designs. But yeah, I think this is one of my favorite summer ones because it's in a bamboo cotton yarn.
Could you maybe stand up and show us the whole length of it, or hold the whole thing up? Okay, so it ends there, because I didn't know how long it went. That's why I was thinking 20s. I thought it was way down.
Yeah, sorry.
So that's okay. This is very Art Deco looking. I haven't seen that pattern. It's very attractive.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. It's such a good pattern. It's so fast as well. You wouldn't expect it, but.
Oh yeah, well, with all those open holes and a lot of yarn overs, they do go fast. And especially if you're able to memorize the pattern and you don't have to keep referring, then I would think it goes much faster.
Yeah. I'm just going to put on my jacket, my cardigan again, because it's a little bit chilly in our house.
Okay. You could tell us about the cardigan.
So yes, this is actually, this is a suit I knit that actually made the skirt for once because it's in a thicker yarn. It's a DK weight yarn. A nice raglan shape, as you can see, with seed stitch on the edges, and the skirt. This is the matching skirt, which has these little buttons going up.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and I know you don't see tweed yarns very often in original garments, but for instance, when Katie was showing her yarn samples in your last podcast, she showed some that had the tweed flex in it. So they did have tweed yarns in those days, which was exciting to see.
I watch old Alfred Hitchcock films. I'm thinking like Rebecca. The woman goes into town and she's dressed in her suit, and I don't know if it is tweed. I'm going from my memory, but I'm imagining that some of these suits that women would wear in the afternoon were like olive green or brown. Is the yarn British?
No, this is actually, again, this is another hand-dyed yarn by Fabel Knitwear.
Oh.
So she's in Norway.
Yes, I mean, I think, why not tweed? I'm sure they were wearing tweed suits and men were wearing tweed jackets and vests and so forth in that time period. So I like it.
Yeah, I do too. I think
I'm
it's
waiting
really nice.
until I'm somewhere in the British Isles to buy some tweed yarn, because I bet they have the nicest stuff there. We have tweed in America, but if I'm going to buy tweed, I think I'd like to have the real deal.
Yeah. This is the pattern, by the way.
Yours looks much nicer than that.
Aw,
Well, your
you.
jacket is, you know, very form fitted. Hers is much longer.
Yeah, I made it slightly. I made my tension a bit tighter because I wanted it to be a little bit more fitting. So I think this probably would have been originally knit in an Aran weight yarn rather than DK. This one. Yeah, it was a little bit of a gamble, but it paid off.
I'm sure that was a labor of love.
Yeah, surprisingly, the skirt was very fast. I didn't expect that.
It's all stockinette?
Yeah, it's all stockinette, just with at the edge, there's a seed stitch again, and it wraps over, which is where the buttons were. Yeah, but it was really, really, really fast.
Wow, I'm glad I asked you to stand up. I would see this.
I was going to show it.
Okay.
But yeah, that's again from a Minerva style book.
Wow. How long would you say it took you to knit that whole suit?
Not too long. My Ravelry page might actually say. The jacket, I think, only took me about 2 weeks.
Oh, that's pretty quick. But you're tiny.
And then the skirt, probably a few more.
So just a little over a month? Wow.
Probably, yeah.
Wow.
Also, I didn't have much to do then.
Maybe that's why you have tennis elbow.
Maybe I overdid it.
Too much.
Too much knitting.
Too much repetition. If it's all stockinette, I wonder if there are any people out there who know about the ergonomics of knitting. I wonder if doing different stitches breaks things up. If it's all stockinette, it's just, you know, knit.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you have to do something else, like a yarn over PSSO, knit two together. I wonder if that changes how we're moving.
Probably.
And maybe that breaks up the repetition.
Yeah, so lace knits are probably better.
I wonder, I mean, it's just a hypothesis. I really have no idea, but maybe people will comment and say,
Yeah.
if they know. Some people who is out there in the knitting community in the world at large, who knows what the backgrounds are. There could be physical therapists who would weigh in.
There is an American man who wrote a book on the ergonomics.
Yes. Carlton, something like that.
Yes. So I don't know, I don't have his book, so I can't say if he talks about different stitch patterns.
He might.
He might, yeah.
But
it's too difficult to get a hold of here, that book. So.
Oh, is it?
You can order it from him, but shipping is so expensive that
I'll find the title and maybe a link, and I'll put it in the show notes. Because I think it's a thing. I mean, I think that other people run into trouble from time to time. I was just talking with my local group. Every so often we do a group Zoom of New York knitters. Mm-hmm. And it came up in conversation about some of these injuries. And how people don't like to do the purl stitch. And I said, the way I purl, it's really very smooth and effortless for me. And I never even give it a second thought. So they asked me to do a tutorial, which I haven't done yet, but at some point I'm going to demonstrate how I purl because it's no problem. I don't feel like I'm exerting any effort to do it.
Yeah.
In any of my joints, elbow, shoulder, fingers, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't find purling that tricky either. It's normally very quick for me, but I normally knit continental.
I was going to ask you if you're continental or English.
Yeah. So I don't know if that makes a difference.
I think so. I think the people who throw have a lot more motion going on. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm no authority, so don't listen to anything I'm saying. It's all conjecture.
Hmm.
Okay, what else? I know you said you have some vintage, authentic vintage knits. Are those things that are not knit by you?
Yes. They're original garments from the...
That's what I understood. I'd love to see any of those that you want to share. And then I know you told me you have the patterns that were used to knit those.
Yeah, just for one of them. I brought down one of them because I have the original pattern.
How did it come to pass that you got these objects?
Well, so this set I bought from a vintage dealer here in the UK.
They came together, the sweater and the pattern?
No, I saw she showed me the sweater, and it's a suit actually, a sweater and skirt, and I recognized it from a pattern from a Minerva knitting book. And I was like, oh wow, I've got the pattern for that. So of course
you already had the pattern. Mm-hmm. Wow, how cool is that?
Yeah.
Well, don't keep us in suspense one moment longer.
So this is the jumper, the sweater.
Oh, lovely.
It's very clever because it has a zipper just here, so you can make the neckline bigger and you can get into it without any problems.
So that's tricky. Here, I thought it unbuttons to get in.
No, it has a sneaky zipper. It's from the 30s again, and some beautiful giant buttons.
They're very large, yes.
Yeah.
It seems like you'd be able to get your head through that opening without the zipper, no?
I don't know. It depends. I probably could, but if I'd already done my hair nicely,
right,
it would probably mess it up a bit.
I have somewhere in my closet one of those mesh bonnets that you put over, if you have all of your makeup on, you put it over your head, it zips, and then you can slide things off and on, evening gowns or whatever, and your makeup never comes in contact with the garment. I have to find that.
That's useful.
I was looking for it recently and I couldn't find it, but one day I'll stumble upon it. It's a cool thing. And it's that color, it's that peachy, flesh tone, that classic color.
Yeah, amazing.
That color has a name. I wonder if somebody knows if it has a specific name. It's not peach, it's not pink, it's not flesh.
People often call it peach, but it really isn't peach, I would say. It's kind of,
it's special. We have to get it a good name because it's really shows up in all different kinds of things.
Maybe somebody can suggest a good name in the comments.
Well, somebody really old knows from.
Yeah, well, it might say in one of the magazines and from the time period. There probably is a term for it.
Okay, I'm going to be on a mission to find out what exactly this is called.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go through my magazines as well and have a look.
I belong to a group on Facebook that's vintage lovers, and I might ask there. Those gals, they probably know. You should see the things these people have. I mean, this hat, it wouldn't even raise an eyebrow. They have unbelievable things. So I bet everybody knows what this color is. Anyway, sorry to digress.
No, it's okay. It's fun.
It's fun. I mean, I enjoy these chats that I have with strangers halfway around the world. I hope everybody else is enjoying it too.
Well, I enjoyed watching them, so.
Oh, okay, good. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
That means so much.
No, it's really nice that you've been doing these. It's great.
Thank you. I don't get a lot of feedback, so I feel like, I'm in an island of one, and I could use a little encouragement from time to time, people.
Well, maybe there'll be lots of comments now.
I hope. Hard sometimes to sustain the energy and the momentum when you feel like, is there anybody out there? It's like Desmond out there in the dark somewhere.
It's not like seeing people in person where you're getting lots of comments automatically, but when people are watching something online, I guess they don't necessarily feel like they need to comment.
Well, maybe now they will.
So different.
I hope now they will. Some people do, and I love them for it.
Oh.
Okay, so the pattern for that.
Yes. So it has a matching skirt.
Yes, let's see the skirt.
It's just plain stockinette.
There's no kick pleat. There's no slit at the bottom. Just
no.
Laying down.
Yeah, and actually on me it's full length because I'm short. I don't think it's meant to be completely full length, but it looks good. But yeah, it has the typical elastic with a crochet zigzag over the top, which I did on this skirt as well. Actually, try to imitate it. But the pattern, I took a copy because my booklet is falling slightly apart and I didn't want to hold it up too much. So that's the pattern.
Wow. Perfect. Unbelievable. How great. And the colors are wonderful for you. You lucked out. It's so amazing that people are able to find things that fit them.
Well, I buy a lot of vintage.
I try, but I don't have a 28-inch or 26-inch waist. Mm. A lot of the vintage clothing, the waists are very tiny. And I don't know if I could ever even dye it enough to get my waist down to that size.
Yeah, it's tricky when it's larger waist size than 28 inches. They do exist, but I think they're more sought after as a result. So they tend to be a lot more expensive or go faster.
I have some. I'm lucky that I have them. And I've heard people say that if you can get something that, even if it's smaller, if there's fabric in the seams that could be let out, it's worth paying somebody to do those alterations because you have something that is of a quality that you cannot find in today's garments.
Yeah. But that's the great thing about knitwear is that it's stretchy. Very often it'll fit a range of sizes.
To a point.
Yeah, to a point of course, but a little bit at least.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean this one isn't particularly stretchy, also because it's I think it's a rayon yarn and it's quite tightly knit, so it doesn't have as much stretch. But other knit sets from the period that I have are a lot more stretchy.
Looks like it's knit on a very fine needle.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's probably about 30 stitches. 2-4 inches.
There are
the gauge, I would
There
think.
are finer gauges than that. I had something that was knit by my Aunt Matilda that I showed in one of my very early episodes. And I have one of these gauge rulers. I'll put a picture of it here. I'll insert a still picture. It was off the chart. There were more stitches than this gauge ruler even accommodated for, because I don't think anybody's knitting really at that gauge. It might have been 42.
Oh, wow.
Something like it. I mean, it was really, really way out there, teensy. She was an unbelievable knitter, and she did knit suits, 3-piece suits. There were like a sleeveless shell, and then the jacket and the skirt. And there was one that I don't know what happened to it. It doesn't exist anymore, perhaps. I don't have it. I have some of her things. But there was a 3-piece suit that was solid sequin, iridescent, like pink, blue, pale lavender. They kind of changed color depending on the angle, all over. And I remember seeing her knitting that.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder how long it took her to knit that, because I guess you must have threaded on the sequins as you went along. I don't really know how that works.
I did a demo. I'll put a link up here. In one of my earlier episodes, I put a little tutorial on how to do it. Yes, you load the sequins onto the yarn, and obviously the yarn is very fine. So it goes through that little hole in the sequin easily. And then you slide it up and insert it into the stitch as you're knitting.
Amazing.
It's fun to do. I have done it. I don't have anything at the moment because I had something that I made in the 80s that was a little like an evening top, sleeveless, spaghetti straps. And it was so out of fashion at a point, I got rid of it. I thought I don't have room to store things that, I'm not wearing. Now I wish I had it, but I could do it again. I mean, I know how. I do know how. And I will do something in the near term. I'm thinking of knitting a hat with a knit bird, something maybe similar to this, but I want to knit a little bird. And then I thought I would put sequins on the feathers or something.
Oh, wow. That would be amazing.
This is a pipe dream for now, but maybe somewhere in the future in my crystal ball.
I'd love to see that.
Okay. Do you have other things?
Yes.
Hey, keep going. Keep going.
I will show the pattern first. This was one of my first 30s knits from a few years ago. So that is the pattern. It's a suit again, but I started knitting the skirt, and I think I have about this much of it because it's on tiny needles, and it's taking me too long, and I don't know, maybe eventually I will finish it if I do a few rows each year.
I have this idea. Maybe people will comment if they like this idea. Maybe we could start a group. Arna and Carlos mentioned it, but I had this thought before I heard them mention it, that a lot of us have projects that are unfinished. Wouldn't it be great to give me your unfinished project and I'll give you my unfinished project, and we could finish one another's projects and then return them to their rightful owner? Because knitting on something of yours, it would be fresh and new and exciting to me, a new yarn and a new stitch pattern, and the same for you. And then, just to go that last mile sometimes is so hard because you're bored with it or something. But wouldn't that be great that you get your things finished and you have finished something for someone else too? I mean,
yeah,
I think it would be great if we had like what do you call it? Like a cooperative where everybody is pooling their resources and taking on especially if you know that somebody has the same tension as, I mean, that would be very important that they're knitting with the same tension. But it would be easy, even internationally, to send swatches back and forth. Like, here's the yarn, here's how I knit it. Does it match how you knit? There's got to be somebody out there who knits the same tension as I do.
That would be really interesting.
Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? I mean, comment below. We could start a thing. I just think it would be great. I mean, I have things that are just sitting in a closet, packed away, that I would love to have finished, but for one reason or another, they're not getting done. Although this year, people know who have been watching me, Fifi, finish it first. I am finishing so many things, and I am so, there's this British podcaster, she goes, halo, halo. So I feel like I've been very diligent.
Very good.
In 2021. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh,
so
that's okay.
Pattern, okay.
Yeah, so that's a pattern. It's from a Bear brand and Bucilla yarns book. Another, I think it's another American one.
Say the name again. Bear
brand and Bucilla yarns.
Bear and okay,
maybe it's Canadian again. I don't know.
No, okay. Well,
very often they don't. Oh no, it says here 1935 in USA and Canada.
Okay.
So both. And this is my version.
Again, with the pink and the black. It's black and brown.
No, it's black. Yeah. I don't often knit in black, actually.
It's very hard on your eyes.
I just find black a bit boring.
This is navy. It was tedious. And I knit this sweater more than once until I got it.
You can't really see stitch patterns very well on dark covers. But yeah, this actually, it's a little lace pattern on the cuffs and on the collar.
I can see the light going through, so.
Yeah. But yeah, so I decided to make a two-tone, even though in the pattern it's just one color. And I also made the little braided belt, tie belt that goes with it in black. But this is still one of my favorites, even though it's from several years ago. Because also the stitch is just really, it's very effective. It's just a little like a scale pattern. And it has no ribbing, which is unusual.
You don't like ribbing? You have something?
I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of ribbing, although it's growing on me a bit more now, I think. But I get bored of ribbing, especially if it's several inches.
Which many vintage things have, 4 inches of ribbing.
Yeah. Yeah. Although technically, I mean, this is technically a rib pattern. It's just you swap, because you do two knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, and then after 4 rows you swap, you do it vice versa. So it is technically a ribbing pattern after I just said that. But for some reason that it didn't feel like a rib pattern as much. But yeah, that's still one of my favorites. And then I can show you another British one. This is from a 1930s Stitchcraft knitting booklet, 31. This was, I think, possibly my first lockdown knit last year. I was recovering from illness, not from COVID, but from shingles.
Oh.
And so I was doing lots of knitting. And I think this was the first one. And it has an interesting stitch pattern again, where you
pretty.
Yeah, it's a really pretty one. It gives it's like a little V, almost like a V shape gives you. And I've got the
color's very beautiful.
a knitting book.
Oh,
there it is.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and she actually also, I put a dress clip on it, and that's what she's got on there as well.
It must be very satisfying to compare yours to the one pictured, because so far the things that you've shown us the pattern for, I prefer yours to theirs.
Ah, thank you.
So
that's really nice.
Be a very good feeling.
That's really nice. Yeah, this one I found a bit tricky to figure out, because you knit this collar in a seed stitch separately, and then you have to sew it on, and the same with the cuffs. And it doesn't give you very good instructions on how to sew it on,
okay.
Which way around it's supposed to go.
I'm familiar with that.
So it took me ages to figure out, and I think I got it right, but who knows? It looks right anyway. Yeah, so that was interesting. It was very fiddly.
No one will know if it's not right, and if it looks good, that's all that counts. So
yeah, true. Yeah. So you can sometimes make up your own variation, I guess, if you can't figure out how it's supposed to go.
The picture sometimes tells 1,000 words. So if you can get it to look like the picture.
Yeah, that's what I did in the end. I just stared at the photograph for a long time.
And sometimes there's only one photograph. Like, hello, it would be helpful to know what the back looks like.
Yes, or the side. For instance, the sleeves on this, they have a little opening.
Little knot.
And I figured that out by just staring at her sleeve for ages. But it doesn't tell you that in the pattern.
And when you're knitting along and you come to this thing, you're like, am I doing this right? Is this what they really mean? Where is that? Why is that? I don't see it in the picture, but it is there in that picture. I mean, if you look hard.
Yeah, I'm trying to look if there's a different picture on the inside where the pattern is. I can't find it now though. Oh well, couldn't find it. I don't think so. I think it's the same picture actually in black and white on the inside.
Yeah.
At least it's nice and big on the front.
Okay, you have more.
Another Stitchcraft pattern actually from 2 years before this one. This one was 1936. This one's from 1934. And it's again a little lace pattern. And I used a graduated yarn for this, which is not, it's another hand-dyed yarn. It's just, I like hand-dyed yarns. And I know it's not that authentic, but I kind of don't care. It doesn't have to be completely authentic for me.
Okay.
But what I like about this one is that the way you knit the lace pattern, it automatically gives it a scallop edge on the sleeves. That just happened naturally.
Is it cast on at that edge and then up to the shoulder?
And then the way you knit the lace pattern, it just pulls it up. Which is, it's so clever. So clever. I love that. And yeah, that's the...
It may not have been intentional, but I think that does happen. I've knit something lace where that happened, so.
Yeah, it was intentional in this pattern.
Yes. I think the person who designed it, maybe as they were planning it, it happened and they were like, oh, okay, that looks good.
Yeah, maybe.
I think that's a property of doing lace.
Yeah. Yes, I love lace knitting. I don't tend to have that many color work pieces.
I don't feel that way too. I mean, I have done color work, but I like lace. I think lace can go very quickly. You have a lot of air.
Yeah, and I like doing complicated patterns. You might have to concentrate more on it, but it keeps it interesting.
I totally agree. And one tip, if you're a newbie, which I know you're not, is if you have a pattern that repeats every 12 stitches, if you put a little stitch marker there, then you can see if you're on track. If you finish the row and you don't have 12, 12, 12, 12 all the way across,
yeah,
it's easy to identify where your mistake is and you can drop back and fix it. The first time I knit lace, I didn't do that. I didn't know to do that. And it was driving me bonkers because my very first lace pattern, it was patterning on both sides. It wasn't just purl back. There was something else happening on the wrong side. And it was very, very hard to follow, especially without charts. So that's just a good tip for people if you're going to do lace. And I agree with you. I really prefer lace to doing things like cables.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you when you knit lace, do you prefer having a chart or do you prefer it written out?
Chart.
Mm-hmm.
I like chart for everything. I like chart for color work. I like chart for lace, anything. It's my mind. I have a mathematical mind and I'm able to read a graph or a chart. So I think it's because my mind works that way. I'm sure there are people who feel like chart, no.
Yeah.
But it's really great because you get to see what it's going to look like. Which, by the way, reminds me, I will put something in the show notes. I was just reading somebody's description of their sweater on Ravelry, and she mentioned a website. How fantastic. You can put in your K6 P4 slip 1 with yarn in front. You can type all of that in and it will convert it to a chart.
Ooh, that is useful.
Very useful for vintage pattern where it's usually no chart and you can't see how the stitches are going to look. Now suddenly you can see, oh, this is a chevron with a chunk of reverse stockinette at the bottom of the V. Yeah, I'll put that. That's like
that'll be really useful.
A good find, especially if you're facile with reading from the chart. I think it really gives you a picture. So like what you see is what you get, as opposed to a string of letters and numbers. You can't look at that and tell me that you know how that's going to look until you do your swatch or until you start knitting. Well, maybe you don't want that surprise.
Yeah, like Jessica when she was knitting from the trove patterns that she couldn't see because the pictures were too grainy. I loved that she just wanted to see surprise what it looks like. I love that. But it's really useful. That would be a very good tool to have, especially because also I find when they in the lace patterns, vintage lace patterns, they tend to they have row 1, a few K, whatever, yarn over, etc. And then row 2 starts in the same line. And it's so hard it's just so tiny and all in one go. They don't
right, in newspapers
put it into the new line because they were saving on paper.
Right, in the newspapers, right. I've seen that.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard to see. I always have to write them out first because I just don't want to squint at this tiny piece of paper and try and figure out which row I'm on.
Well, speaking of Jessica, she missed our call last time, which is probably my fault, but I'm going to do another group session, and I hope, I'm not putting you on the spot by saying, I hope that you'll join us in April. So for the viewers, I want you to know we're going to do another one of those where my past guests will come back and we'll all be chatting amongst ourselves. So I'm sure she'd love to meet you, and it sounds like you'd love to meet her too. So that'll be fun. I don't think she'll miss this one because she was so disappointed last time. And yeah, Jessica, if you're watching, please accept my apologies. You will be front and center this time. And you have more things to show us?
Yes. So okay. That was the full length. I don't think I showed the ribbing.
Adorable.
So I've got one more vintage knit, and I also have two modern ones that are vintage style.
Okay.
That I thought I could show, just in case anybody was interested. But the one more vintage one, I don't have the pattern here because I only have a really grainy picture. of it, is a cardigan, and it's a striped cardigan with a collar.
Is it two colors or is it just the stitch that's making it? Oh, it is two colors.
Yeah, it is properly striped. But what is really clever about it is you start on one sleeve and then you knit across that way, and you put some stitches on the stitch holder when you come to the front and back. But it was so clever to knit, and I had to do a little bit of calculating to get the stripes to line up at the front.
Mm-hmm. When you knit things like that, which I also have knit a sweater that started at one cuff and went sideways across, that's one of the rare times when row gauge becomes important. Normally we're just concerned with stitch gauge, but when you're doing that, your row gauge really matters if you want it to fit.
Yeah.
And a lot of yarn companies don't give you row gauge.
No. Also, a lot of vintage patterns, I don't think, give you row gauge.
Right, that too.
I don't remember if with this one it did. But this one, it gave you measurements. So it would say, it didn't give you knit X amount of rows, but knit 3 centimeters or 3 inches. So I think that's how it worked on this one. And it is actually a bit stretchy, quite a bit stretchy, but it's a super comfy cardigan, and it's very chic because it has kind of bishop sleeves, and then it nips in at the waist with the ribbing, which is quite deep ribbing, and then blouses over the top slightly. So it's very chic.
Is it garter stitch?
Yes, it is, which is why it's so stretchy. Yeah, and it just has a bit of 2 rows of crochet around the collar and the front of the buttons as well.
And you're using vintage buttons?
Yes, these are vintage buttons.
Pretty.
Same on this, actually. These were vintage ones too. And this is a vintage button. I think they're all vintage buttons, actually.
Well, finding one is not a problem, but on this pink and blue, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 buttons. To find 12 buttons that all match, that's...
Yeah, I bought these just for this. And they were dead stock buttons, so they came on their original card.
Oh, fun. I hope you kept a picture of that.
Yes, yeah. I have a whole bunch of them. I have a giant stash of vintage buttons and buckles for my knitting in particular.
I try not to do that. There's a woman who exhibits at a lot of the shows in the United States, Dusty's Vintage Buttons. I'll give her a shout out, a plug. When you go into her booth, it's like you arrived in heaven, because it's mostly all vintage buttons, and she's got sets, and they're on those little cards, and one is more fantastic than the next. Bakelite, and those vintage colors that you don't see anymore, like orange and taupe and brown combination, or olive green. I need buttons right now. I reached out to her. We'll see. It's hard. I mean, she's not able to do any shows because all the shows are canceled, and she hasn't previously done a lot of online selling. So we'll see if I can get buttons for my current project. Anyway.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
Yeah, so I've got 2 modern knits and vintage style I could show. One is by the Poison Girls, which one of your guests mentioned previously, I think.
Yes.
Which is a color work jumper because I made this for Christmas. It's called the Night Before Sky sweater, and it has a snowflake pattern on it. And what I liked, it had little baubles on the sleeves.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's a very nice, easy knit. I found it very easy to knit, and has a tiny puff sleeve, puff shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, sometimes my German comes through a little bit, and I get mixed up with my words, so apologies.
Is that your first language, German?
Yes, although I did grow up bilingual actually, so yeah.
I'm not hearing any accent.
Thank you. My mother's American. That's probably the reason.
Yeah, so it's a real mixture, and it comes out pretty easy, and like easy for an American ear to understand. It's not as British as some Brits, and that's why.
Yeah.
Yes, but I'm not hearing the German.
Well, my German friends now say that when I speak German, I have a slight English accent.
It's like me. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I had a real twang. When I arrived in New York, people knew that I wasn't a New Yorker. And then I lived in California for a year, and everyone just assumed that I was from New York. Now I've lived in New York. Oh, I'm embarrassed to say this. It's 50 years.
Wow.
I can't believe it, because it seems like, I'm still 23. But I hope that I don't have a total New York accent. I still say New York, and you can hear the R. My husband, on the other hand, is from Long Island, which Long Islanders say Long Island. Like when he says New York, you might not know what he's saying. It's not how I say it. Okay, you have one more?
Yes, I have one more, which is one I actually test knit at the time. And it is also by Fabel Knitwear. So the lady I buy the hand-dyed yarn from. And she also does knitting patterns, and she does a lot of vintage inspired things. She's also, I think she used to be a costume designer in London, and has a vintage shop as well now in Norway. And it's an Edwardian style knit. It's called the Heirloom jumper. And I loved it because it has, again, a lace knit. Mm-hmm. And this lace knit panel, which is really beautiful. And it has a very slight puff sleeve and just a very nice line. And it's in mohair together with a strand of fingering white yarn. So it's a bit fluffy.
I can see that halo.
Yeah.
Very
yeah. And I just really liked this one. And I like that it's slightly different because it has an Edwardian feel.
And the neck is almost like a funnel neckline. It comes up. Yeah, it's elegant.
Yeah, it's very elegant. So.
Oh, and there's little buttons in the back of the neck.
Yes, there's little buttons.
Ah, that's pretty. And they're functioning buttons. You have to unbutton them?
You do indeed.
Okay.
Nice little touch. Yeah, no, I like her patterns because I find they're easy to knit, but they have these vintage touches to them, the little vintage details that I like so much.
Okay, I think we have really used up a lot of time, and I'm very appreciative that you spent this time with us.
My pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
I hope that we'll see you again in April. And I think it's probably time for you to get on with the rest of your day, and it's time for me to say adios, goodbye. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful knitting.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Billy.
And be well, rest your elbow, and good luck with, you know, getting over the pain or whatever is going on. And I hope you'll be able to knit again soon.
Hope so.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Billy.
Bye.
Bye.